Welcome back to the Jordan Kitchen. Today I want to demonstrate how to make olive oil cake. This is something that we like to use for a lot of our culinary events and dinners. We're using olive oil that comes from our estate. The nice thing about this cake is it's using ingredients you probably already have at home. We're going to use a springform pan, and to prepare it is very simple. Just spray it and then we'll line it with some parchment paper. And this will make it easy to get it out of the pan once you're done. And the other thing you want to remember is to make sure your oven is preheated. So if you're using a convection oven, that would be 325, regular oven about 350. And I'll just set this aside. We are going to start with half of our sugar. There's about 3/4 cup of sugar in this recipe. And so we just divide it in half. We're going to use half right now and then half later with some egg whites. And we use some salt here for flavor. The flavor that we're using is vanilla bean. You can also use vanilla extract if you like, but the bean is really nice because it gives you a little bit richer flavor, and it also looks really pretty in the cake. So you just split it in half and then scrape out the beans. If you want to save the pod for later, you can. You can throw it inside of a custard or infuse it as a flavor into something else. So after the vanilla bean, we're going to use lemon, and I use about half of a lemon, use the zest, and then we're going to cut it and use the juice from about half the lemon. It heightens the flavor, it gives the cake a nice flavor, but then it doesn't overwhelm the cake. You want the flavor of the olive oil to really come through and not be blocked. After the lemon, we'll use 2 egg yolks, and we're going to save these whites to whip a little bit later. So I'll just put them right into the bowl that we'll be using to whip those. And it just takes 2 egg yolks, and save these whites. And this is called a high ratio cake. That means there's more fat and sugar in the cake than there is flour. So that makes it really easy. That's basically like you were to do a carrot cake. And then we'll just do one last step at the end with the egg whites. So last flavor we're going to use is olive oil. So traditionally in a cake you might be using butter, but this replaces that as the fat. The nice thing about olive oil is you're going to get a cake that's really rich and it's be really smooth. So sometimes when you use butter and you refrigerate the cake, it feels like it gets hard and dry. Olive oil will stay nice and soft. Last thing that we're going to use now is cake flour. So cake flour is a little bit softer than regular all-purpose flour. It'll give you a little bit fluffier consistency. And we'll just gradually add that. I'll use about 1/3 of it and sift it in. So when you sift flour, what happens is you add a little bit of air, and that will just translate into a little bit of airier cake, lighter texture. If we added it all at once, or if we didn't sift it, you would probably get some lumps, and then you would end up having to mix it for a while longer. Once you add flour into the cake, you want to mix it as little as possible, because the more you mix, the tougher your cake will be. So as you can see, this is really, really simple. It's almost like making any other kind of cake. And that's all you have to do for now. Now our last step will also be easy. The most important thing is to have a good mixer. So we use 2 of our whites from the yolks that we used earlier. We're going to add a 3rd white just to give it some volume. When you're making a meringue, you want to make sure that your eggs are room temperature. So even if it's for like 30 minutes outside of the fridge, that's fine. And when you have it at room temperature, you're going to get the most volume out of your meringue. Okay, so now we're going to use our mixer to complete the batter. We're going to use a meringue to finish it off. So it's almost like I said, like a carrot cake, but the thing that makes it different is adding this meringue, because now it'll be a lot lighter and fluffier. So we'll bring our mixer over. The other important thing you want to make sure to remember when you're making a meringue is that your bowl is really clean and your egg white. So if you get any egg yolk in there, you want to take a spoon and scoop it out, because the meringue won't get fluffy if there's any fat in it. So we'll add our whisk. We want to mix it for a little bit before we add sugar. If we dumped it in all right now, there'd be absolutely no volume. It would overwhelm the whites. But if we get it a little foamy first, it starts to build structure, and then it can hold the whites. The purpose of this meringue is going to be to incorporate a lot of air into your cake. So we're going to get the sugar in there, but we want to do it gradually. So we let the egg whites start to foam a little bit. That'll give it some structure so that it can hold the sugar. So if we were to dump it all in at once, there would be no volume. So we add it little by little. When you see the foam start to grow, just start adding sugar. There's 3/4 cups in the recipe. And so like we said, we put half in the first part of the mix. Now we're going to add the other half to the whites. And the nice thing is that the sugar is going to stabilize the whites so that they don't lose their volume when you go to mix them into the batter. I'll usually put in about a tablespoon and then let the mixer go for about 5-10 seconds, add a little bit more, and then keep going until you've added it all. You really can't over whip these whites because we're taking them to firm peaks. So that's really as much as the meringue is going to foam. You can keep the mixer on, maybe on low, as long as you want. Just keep in mind that if you don't use it right away, it will get firm and be hard to mix into your batter. This is about the consistency that you want. So now we're gonna fold it in. We just wanna do about 1/3 of it at a time. By adding the meringue gradually, we're gonna help the mix get to a similar consistency as the rest of the meringue so that it will incorporate a lot easier. You don't need to fully mix it each time because we're gonna do a final mix at the end. Like I said, when you have flour in a recipe, you want to mix it as little as possible. So the folding is really gentle. I like to go down the center and around the sides and rotate it just a little bit. So I can see that it's mostly even. There's going to be some streaks, but we'll worry about completely finishing it off towards the end. So we'll add the final part of our meringue. So the purpose of making a meringue is so that your cake is light and fluffy. So we're putting a lot of air into the cake that normally wouldn't be there, or else you would normally use something like a chemical leavener, such as baking soda or baking powder. So you're going to get all your volume in this cake from these egg whites. So you want to be really gentle with them. So this is about the consistency you're looking for. You're going to see a couple little lumps, but that's really probably just your flavoring that's in there, the lemon zest, and some air pockets, which is good. So you can see there's a lot more volume than when we started. So you want to be careful to stop once you get to this point, because if you keep mixing it, you're just going to continue to deflate all of that air you've worked hard to get, because when there's fat in a recipe, like I said, the meringue doesn't like fat. So now that it's come in contact with the olive oil and the egg yolks in the recipe, it's going to just keep deflating the more you mix it. So this is a 9-inch springform pan, and that's all you have to do. It kind of evens itself out, and at this point you throw it in the oven. It takes about 35 minutes. You can see almost as soon as it starts coming out of the oven, it starts to spring back. That's a good thing, because then you know that your cake is baked through in the middle. It's not raw. If it was raw, it would just start deflating, but right here you see it's kind of pulling in. And so while this is cooling, it'll take probably an hour and a half. I let it stay with the springform ring on for about 30 minutes just to make sure that the shape stays stable. Then you can pull that off and let it cool for another hour. And then while you're waiting for it to cool, then you'll prepare your garnishes. So this cake is now completely cool. It's been a couple hours, and now it's ready to serve. It's really nice all by itself if you want. I'll just put powdered sugar just for looks. This isn't important to the recipe, but it's a nice look. And you can use this cake really if you wanted for a wedding cake. It'd be a nice layer instead of a vanilla. If you wanted to do that, you might take out the lemon zest and add a different flavor, or just keep it vanilla. But what we like to do at Jordan is to use this almost as a replacement for like a shortcake. So we would serve this slice on a plate using berries from our garden. This time of year we have a lot of nice things coming out of the garden. One of those things is strawberries. So it's something that we like to feature for a lot of our guests. We're just adding some fresh whipped cream. And because we have these nice olive branches coming in this time of year, it's a nice garnish to use also. And we'll drizzle it with a little bit of the Jordan extra virgin olive oil. So as you can see, this is a really easy recipe, and it turns out beautiful. It's a nice cake to make during the spring. The olive oil, like I said, is harvested here on the estate. It's for sale exclusively on our website. So please feel free to let us know how yours turned out if you have any questions or comments.